Today's question is, what are my beliefs about the power of positive thinking and manifestation? This is a real tricky one, but I will say I think positive thinking and manifestation are extremely important parts of spirituality and just personal development in general. I first discovered really self-help back in 2018. It was immediately post leaving college and realizing that I was a scared adult in a big world, unlike how I am now, where I'm totally grounded and confident in myself all the time about my place. No, I've gotten comfortable with my small place in this big world. It's just been an interesting handful of years. So, positive thinking. It's something that I really tried to brute force when I started reading about all these stories that people had. That's what it comes down to a lot of the time in self-help books, is great anecdotal stories of people who just overnight completely shifted their thinking to always just look at everything in a completely positive light. Very, very Pollyanna. I remember even reading what I still think is a great book, which is Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, but there's a part near the end where he sets a challenge that, like, you're going to go an entire week or something without having any negative thoughts last longer than a few minutes. And that's just wacky to me in hindsight. But hey, I tried to take the challenge and I was like, hey, let's just flip every single negative thought to suddenly be a positive one. And of course, that's a very 0 to 100 kind of way to approach your psyche that kind of neglects to realize that we are somewhat stuck in the way that we are, at least from day to day. We can amass changes over a very long period of time, even maybe some significant ones, but it does not ever happen overnight. So if you are not naturally inclined to think extremely positively, like I am not, and I think most of the world is not, trying to take up the goal of nothing but positivity tomorrow, I think you're just really setting yourself up for not even just failure, just frustration and giving up on the concept of positive thinking altogether. Whereas setting a small challenge, the micro-habit thing of like, okay, I'm going to take one frustrating situation that occurs today and try to see how it could potentially be viewed as either positive or just not as bad as I might be naturally inclined to view it. Right? The small push in that sort of direction. And I think the same thing probably applies to manifestation. When I started learning more about the law of attraction, I watched The Secret when I was like 11 years old, and I immediately asked the universe for all these amazing things, like a friggin' mansion in less than a year at the age of 11. That was an unrealistic expectation, and I think that I once again gained that unrealistic expectation in 2018. I think there was one point when I was like, I'm going to be a millionaire by 2019. And it happened. And it's been great being a millionaire. No, I'm kidding. I had too high of expectations again. They seemed a little bit more they were more realistic compared to how I was in 6th grade, but still not realistic by any stretch of the imagination. What's really worked for me, again, is just setting little small visualizations for how I could be. That isn't radically different from the way that I am right now. Isn't too far-fetched. Is something that's actually somewhat graspable. Of course, any sort of manifestation, any sort of visualization is pretty useless without some actual direct action. Making sure that I am doing my best to embody these things I'm imagining for my life, even starting today. And some days, you're just, with positive thinking, visualization, there are going to be some days where you're just not going to be able to do it. Or you just don't feel like it. You don't feel like it. You're like, I feel crappy and I want to wallow in my crappy feeling. I haven't totally figured out how to handle those kind of days, because there is a certain point when it does just become brute forcing, which I think is pretty ineffective. I've said my method before many times. What's really helped for me, I have some affirmations that have been very, very helpful for me, but all I do is just each couple weeks, I add a new one by just recording myself saying it for a minute, and then I just go to my playlist of affirmations that I've said, and I just play them on shuffle. And a lot of the time, I'm not even actively listening. I'm not trying to be like, oh, yes, listen to, for example, I am wealthy. Yes, think of all the ways in which I have money. I just let it play in the background. And you find that even just doing that, a lot of the time, you start to take actions toward actually making real these things. But it's just a very ironic, counterintuitive thing that the more that you try to brute force any sort of positive change in your life, the more anxious you get about it and the more negative you feel about it. But you have to give just a little bit, you know, maybe just even the bare minimum of positive thinking and manifestation. You push it just enough. And then what I've also said before, a video about prayer, there's a real important part of letting it go. If I can't feel better about this situation, okay, I will just let it go. And that's in its own way a form of positive thinking. If I can't immediately see this thing that I want in my life, if I haven't already manifested it, I'll send it out into the universe and then I'll let it go. I'll let it go. That's one of the most powerful parts of the whole thing that I think is quite often lost. And that was not easy for me to do in my early days of trying it, and some days still is not. Hoping to reach my millionth subscriber by the end of this week.